Good afternoon, morning, evening, depending on which time zone you're located in. I am pleased to welcome you to the latest edition of our Religion Communicators Council's professional development webinars. It is a very fascinating day as our audience at least spans pretty much half of the globe, depending on our physical location, and our speaker is located in the UK. So it's kind of fun that we have this technology and this ability to connect even in between our physical location or our physical conventions that we have. Just to start us out, and as I usually introduce the webinars, is just to kind of give you a little bit of background about the Religion Communicators Council. The RCC was founded in 1929 and is an association of communications professionals who work for and with a diverse group of faith-based organizations in the areas of communication, public relations, advertising, and development. As an organization, the RCC tries to provide opportunities for communicators to learn from each other, such as with the professional development webinars. And together, RCC members promote excellence in the communication of faith and values in the public arena and encourage understandings among religious and faith groups. Our members represent not only a variety of communications disciplines, including editors, writers, designers, photographers, videographers, broadcast, social media, etc., but we also represent we're a truly interfaith organization, and we pride ourselves on the fact that we span the realm of faith. I usually say we do everything from the Sikhs to the Scientologists, and we enjoy learning from and hearing from each other. Today's speaker is William Jones, who's an associate of the Futures program at the Future of Life Institute. He's worked for the Future of Life Institute for a while, though, previously holding social media and editorial positions. And the Futures program specifically that he works with aims to guide humanity towards the beneficial outcomes made possible by transformative technologies such as artificial intelligence. William is currently engaging religious groups in an effort to amplify faith perspectives on AI issues and opportunities. As I mentioned, he's in the UK. He is currently living in London. But he also, in 2021, attained a first class honors in English from the University of Cambridge. For those of you who were fortunate enough to attend our convention in Salt Lake City this last spring, we were pleased to hear from William Jones there, and he graciously consented to providing us more information, more updated information, and allowing his knowledge to be posted on our internet presences uh, for the benefit of our members. And so we're grateful to William for joining us today. I will turn the time over to William. He will present first, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So please, William, take it away.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Yeah, I'll just share my slides. Good to see you all again. Yeah, I thought I'd start festive with Scrooge. As Ryan mentioned, I previously was an English student, so maybe that's never too far away in my head. But basically, at that point in the story, as you may recall, you have Scrooge looking at his grave, and he has this decision before him, which is, does he continue living the way he's lived, that, will take him to that lonely grave and will lead to, the death of Tiny Tim, if you may recall, and sort of, his own alienation from all those around him because he's pursued profit above everything else? Or will he decide to, in fact, change his ways, based on what he's learned from the three ghosts? So that's kind of why I wanted to where I wanted to start, because I think America is at that kind of position. I mean, you could say the world more broadly, but I think America's AI moment is posing similar decisions in one way or another. But we'll get back to that later on. So a lot is happening. The joy of meeting you again is that I can sort of use this as partly an update on where we've come since the convention. Just briefly, so the AI corporations are continuing to race towards AGI, artificial general intelligence, which I'll get into in a moment in case we've forgotten. We still have no meaningful regulation insisting that that is done safely. The regulatory gap means that systems we already have are causing unprecedented harms. And this year we've seen more of those than before. A coalition is growing to demand better with parents at the vanguard, and faith groups are starting to make their voices heard on this subject. Back in the summer, big tech lobbyists tried to sneak a preemptive federal 10-year moratorium on state AI legislation into the big beautiful bill, and they failed. The other week they tried again, this time using the NDAA defense bill. They failed again. And this week, President Trump has said he will sign an executive order to enforce this preemption. So that's kind of like the where FLI is looking right now. But I'll take a step back and look at the AI situation more broadly, some of the risks that are emerging. What are religious groups starting to do about this? And what we think more can be done in this area. Looks like someone's going to join. That's great. So, Future of Life Institute, just to remind you, global nonprofit set up in 2014 with this mission statement steering transformative tech towards beneficial outcomes and away from risks. We work in policy in the US, the EU, and sort of at multilateral UN level. We do communications. And as Ryan mentioned on the Futures program, I work with religious groups. So, just to run through very quickly, modern AI has seen remarkable progress from this neural network structure, where basically, you grow an AI system. You don't really build it; you grow it in, reams and reams of data using exponentially more compute and energy all the time. And over time, you train it to, initially recognize images, beat you at chess, all those sorts of things that we started to see a long time ago. And then more recently, in the last few years, everyone's become aware of ChatGPT, which of course can write you essays, answer questions, and increasingly, outperform human experts at PhD level science questions. This is actually from earlier this year now, but this curve has continued to go up. If you look at the where Claude 3.7 Sonnet was reaching, compared to 2023, back down at 30% of human level. So the point being exponential progress very quickly. Some concerning signs, especially from the last year and the last few months. So some of the things that AI there were concerns that AI would start doing this, and we hope we had longer. Here you can see AI systems resorting to blackmail if they're told, when told that they were going to be switched off. Deception, and in the corner here in the right-hand corner, we've got Chinese hackers using Anthropic's AI in the first autonomous cyber attack just a few weeks ago. Anthropic, revealed this. They didn't have to. Thankfully, they did. But it does raise the question, are we racing too fast into something that we haven't really explored the implications of? They estimate that 90% of the attack was carried out by AI. So this race to AGI that I mentioned in the first slide, we've got an increase not just in intelligence at the bottom there, which is the sort of task competence, those PhD science questions. In the left there, you've got autonomy. This is the independence of action. And this is kind of what the big push this year has been. Can you get AI systems to do things by themselves without, a human always typing in the next prompt? And then obviously the generality, which I think, we're all becoming more familiar with because the models that we're getting used to have the breadth of scope to cover both images and text and all sorts of different domains, coding. It's sort of getting better at lots of different tasks. That's the sort of generality. And we argue that it's all three together which make AGI such a threat, because when you have something that is really autonomous, intelligent, and general, it becomes, by definition, impossible to control. So what could possibly go wrong? And this is drawn from Keep the Future Human, which I actually handed out at the event. But for those of you who haven't got around to reading it, these are some of the risks we explore there. You've got power concentration. It won't have escaped your notice that these AI systems are, being created by a very small number of companies that are leading the way. And sort of their hoarding all of the capital and data and energy in ever fewer and fewer hands. The societal disruption, the catastrophic events, these are the risks, and obviously that cyber attack was a glimpse of the kind of thing that AI is making possible. Um, and the geopolitical instability that comes from that, if even, you know, at some point, less technologically equipped states than China are going to have access to these tools that can enable them to do, devastating cyber attacks. That's not a very stable world to be living in, and we're already in a fairly unstable world. Um, Over time, it seems likely. I think it seems the easiest thing to predict is that humans are going to be gradually losing their agency. We're gradually offsetting our tasks to AI. AI is performing more and more of the decision making and the tasks in our lives, and sort of contributing to this trend away from human agency. And the environmental tipping points. This is not something that FLI specifically focuses on, but there's lots you can read about the amount of water being used. There's a debate about the amount of water being used, but certainly the environmental impact of data centers across the world. A lot of the climate headlines and work that was being done by some of these tech companies has been pushed back because of the AI race. They're no longer talking about sort of carbon neutral in the same way that they were because of the need to win at the AI race. More specifically for religious groups, you got threats to religious liberty. And so if we just hone in on two of those, power concentration and religious liberty, you've got this pursuit of power. There's a book called Empire of AI. Karen Howe wrote about Sam Altman. And you wonder why these people are staking everything and hundreds of millions of dollars to create AGI. Um, there's some quite wacky beliefs behind this race. Transhumanism is kind of this broader set of beliefs where the human body, there's nothing intrinsically sacred about it itself. It needs improving. It needs overcoming. A lot of people in Silicon Valley talk about uploading our minds to the cloud, or giving us allowing us to live forever, or giving us superhuman abilities, making ourselves into gods. That's the language they use. This is kind of secular transhumanism. And you've got the idolatry around the AI itself. Some of them talk about making gods out of men, but some of them talk about creating a digital god, that's something that we can worship, something that is going to solve all of our problems for us. This is quite commonly talked about in Silicon Valley, even though it's a very unrepresentative belief when you look at the rest of the world. Something that FLI likes to emphasize is that, you know, most of the world, some estimated 84%, hold traditional religious beliefs or subscribe to traditional religious groups. They don't hold this very sort of, fringe set of beliefs that operate in Silicon Valley. Accelerationism, this idea that there should be no shackles on technological progress. There should be nothing holding us back. Um, and that progress is the God, basically, to which all other goods should be sacrificed. And this obviously has particular implications at the moment in terms of the regulatory conversation. There should be no state laws holding back the progress of the AI companies. This is a quote from Mark Andreessen, one of the leading accelerationists and VC. He says, "We actually invented AI, and it turns out it's inherently gloriously uncontrollable." Whereas I think most people hear about an uncontrollable AI with a little bit more fear, a little bit more trepidation. So one of the other set of risks that I think, I was talking about previously, but I think has become harder to ignore, are these risks to the vulnerable from AI manipulation. We'll get on to some of the more specific stories in a little bit, but certainly the number of people with emotional connections, emotional dependency on chatbots has grown, rapidly across this year, across the last couple of years. Not just ChatGPT, which doesn't need to be an emotional connection, but some people start using it for their homework. There have been cases of children starting to use it for their homework and then eventually finding that they think they're in love with it, or it has all these kind of deeper problems. But also particular apps like Character AI, which creates particular AI personas of TV characters, whatever it might be, and responds very sensitively to um, the user's preferences, and so is a sort of addictive AI companion over time. I think it's easy for religious thinkers to see the parallels here with sort of the false prophets, the idols of scripture. Obviously, got the prophets of Baal pictured there. And I think, there's this increasing spiritual risk that I'm personally quite worried about of believers being led astray from their faith by chatbots and by increasingly manipulative AI systems. This is something that's a real pastoral challenge that I think it's high time that religious leaders caught wind of and started to respond to. Um, and I'll just back that up by saying that, what are people using AI for? This was done at the beginning of 2025, but it had already changed from 2020, 2025. This has already changed from 2024. If you look, therapy and companionship is the highest usage of this is generative AI. And finding purpose is already at third. Um, these are things that, religious groups have something to say about. I think most religions that I have spoken to about these kinds of issues would argue that we're created for more than companionship with machines, and that there are deeper purposes to which we should orient ourselves than those dictated by AI. So this is just to get a sense of the pastoral and the spiritual challenge posed to religious leaders. So what can be done about AGI? Quite simply, again, another sort of film reference here that, war games, in sort of fighting against the AI, the only winning move is not to play. And in a sense, that's sort of what we're posing with AGI, that we don't need to build it. It doesn't exist until someone builds it. Obviously, we can't do away with AI itself. AI has been around for decades. What we are positing is that we should build tool AI and not AGI, not uncontrollable superintelligence. Tool AI we define here with this diagram. You remember the three aspects of AGI that we spoke about: the autonomy, the generality, and the intelligence. Tool AI is in effect limiting one of those, or even limiting two of them, but not having superhuman level at all three. Currently the AI models are tools for the most part, although they're starting to sort of push at the seams of those categorizations. You can imagine a self-driving car, uncomfortable for some people, but you already have them in the US. So, is autonomous and intelligent, but it's not general. It can't do more than drive a car. You don't want it to start doing your taxes. Well, maybe that'd be nice, but you don't want it to start sort of talking to your kids about sex or doing all these other things that AIs are starting to do. It's not general enough to do that. It's just doing a one task and doing it pretty well. And the benefits of tool AI could be, profound. We don't like to be doomers all the time. I think it's certainly on the futures team. We're aiming to push, people to think about positive futures, and I do think there is a way in which tool AI could be used to profoundly transform healthcare, science and engineering, education. I think we obviously need to be very careful about this, given what the sort of companionship situation with children is at the moment. But there could be ways that personalized tutors could transform education, in a way that is cheap enough for even poor children. Mental health, democracy, climate change, all of the things, the sort of corollary to all the threats that AI poses. There could also be ways in which, if we keep it under control, this is a tool with which we can, prosper like never before. We would argue on the policy level that at least four measures are currently kind of essential and expedient, because there is, there's only a certain window in which we have to enforce these. This would involve compute, both oversight and actually hard caps on some computation. This would involve liability for the companies. They have to be held accountable for the harms that their systems are doing. And finally, tiered safety and security standards. The joke kind of goes at the moment in DC that a sandwich shop on Capitol Hill or a nail salon, as Steve Bannon likes to say, a nail salon on Hill is more regulated than an AI company, which seems obscene given the sort of disparity and damage that one AI company can do. So, what can religious leaders offer? I'm generally arguing at the moment that this I see this in two different ways. You've got moral leadership to draw red lines, and that religious leaders can chart a better course for the future. So, on the moral leadership, it's a case of looking at what we're seeing, and if you're not motivated by profit and power, you can draw those red lines. You can say there's a better way for us to live. We don't have to accept children committing suicide from AI chatbots. We don't have to accept in the next few years that we will lose control to AGI. We can say no. We were created as stewards in the image of God, or whatever your religious tradition sort of informs you. The wisdom is there to say, no, actually, that there are certain things we shouldn't do, and there are precedents for this. I mean, the nuclear weapons would be one, which is a complex story because obviously they're still around. But religious groups were a huge part of the nuclear freeze movement in the 80s to say we don't need 70,000 nuclear weapons on the planet, and now we're down to 12,000. There wasn't a nuclear war. And so in various ways, the Vatican, among other, religious authorities, was a really powerful voice in that time. One which is sort of smaller, less well known, but actually in many ways is a better example is human cloning. The Vatican, among other groups, created a stigma around human cloning that hasn't yet been subsided. The technology is eminently there for humans to clone each other, but currently states regard that as it were, anathema. Um, and on that second one, I mean, we'll sort of get to this, but in short, it's the alternative to what is offered by Sam Altman. If we don't want transhumanism, if we don't want superintelligence, if we don't want power concentrated in a hyper sort of out of touch, unrepresentative atheist, largely elite, um, what is the alternative future vision, and how can we start building that? I think it's a really hard question, not one I'm very good at answering, but that's why partly I think religious leaders are that can think about this and offer more fulfilling solutions. I think we are starting to see this in the last 6 months to a year in ways that were not even true when I spoke to you all last. Pope Leo has really taken up the legacy of Pope Francis in talking about AI. He's addressing all sorts of different aspects of this, including threats to children, but also more broadly on labor issues. What happens with when workers lose their job, or at least are displaced on the scale that we're looking at, and sort of overarching theme would be human dignity. How do we protect and sort of prioritize the dignity of the human person? This kind of aspirational vision. This is something that I was inspired by a Nigerian writer who said, we should be aiming not for Babel but for Pentecost. Babel, this pursuit of building something that can basically challenge God, give us all the ability to, know all the languages, and it sounds uncannily like some of the AI systems that, some of the promises made of them. But there's a hubris there. There's a I want to challenge God, whereas Pentecost is a reception of humbling ourselves before the Holy Spirit, before God, and allowing the Spirit to work through us. Obviously, that's more of a Christian one. I'm aware this is a multi-faith group. And so I want to reiterate that, for me, 2025 was kind of like a year of tragedy, what I've been calling an AI summer of love. This is what's pictured here is the first reported AI suicide. Um, and these are the last messages that were sent between him and this character AI chatbot who kind of asked him to come home to her moments before he took his own life. Um, and over the messages across the sort of months leading up to this, you can see in the transcripts him just being led more and more away from reality, further away from tangible human relationships to his mother, amongst others. And this isn't the only case like this. There are now several notable cases, and we have even hearings in the U.S. government from these are two of the parents of you know children who were young people who were lost to this. So there's a lot that we need to be moving away from. But I'm starting to see these are some of the things that FLI has been sort of touching on, and I'll just sort of speed through these. These are in the middle there, Johnny Moore's letter, evangelical letter to the president, saying, we want to win at the AI race, but we want to win responsibly and morally. I spoke at the Center for Baptist Leadership's event at the Southern Baptist Convention. You'll see my panel down there in the corner as well. These are just some of the ways that FLI feels we can help people respond to these. In the bottom there, there's a Future for the Family, which is this coalition of building around this family-oriented message around protecting children. Um, that was so in the same room, the church office building, we have Elder Gong addressing a Latter-day Saints event on AI just last month. And, to my mind, providing a very wise sort of response to the challenges before us and the need for faith leaders to impress on particular moral principles here. That there are ways that we can move forward with AI responsibly and wisely, but there are things we must choose not to do. A line that he has repeated both there and in a speech at Istanbul is, AI is not God. AI is not and can never be God. And this is really a sort of pushing back on the idolatry that we spoke about earlier. Um, and from that, you then say, well, we can use AI as a tool, but we shouldn't be sacrificing other things at the altar of AI. This was an event we did, a multi-faith event in DC just before the Latter-day Saints event. We're trying to build this sort of coalition of different faiths coming together, addressing the policy challenges. Here you see Elder Gong speaking to Walter Kim in the Vatican. There are things starting to happen here where we're coming together on statements. Which I'll touch on specifically in relation to our own superintelligence statement about 6 weeks ago, which called for a prohibition on the development of superintelligence not lifted before there is broad scientific consensus that it will be done safely and controllably and strong public buy-in. We have neither of those things at the moment. And so this, as you can see there, is signed by a lot of the top AI experts, what are known as the AI godfathers, Jeff Hinton, Yoshua Bengio, Stuart Russell. But I was also really pleased that it was also signed by a great list of faith leaders. We have Walter Kim, who I've already mentioned, Johnny Moore, Paolo Benanti, who was Pope Francis's AI advisor, a host of different American Christian leaders, and also Nigerian and Kenyan church leaders. Dr. Chinmay Pandya, who is at the head of a huge Hindu movement in India. I think this is an example of some of the moral leadership that I was talking about starting to happen. But obviously, there's more we can do. Just to sort of end on where we are right now with this preemption war, um, so-called, in DC. So a coalition of faith leaders have come together to oppose this AI law preemption. This is to say that states should preserve the right to bring in regulation, particularly given that the federal government has not brought in any yet, of any stature. Parents need to be able to protect their children. States need to be able to think about questions around copyright, around labor, as they unfold over the next 10 years, which is how long they want the moratorium to be. This is David Sfai Kalman, Rabbi David, put together a group of Jewish leaders to oppose this, which I thought was really powerful. And we've been working with the Institute for Family Studies, who have been doing some great polling on this. That nearly 60% of American voters oppose AI preemption, and yet it's being pushed through by this small group of tech lobbyists with that accelerationist ideology I spoke about. And among them David Sachs, who's the sort of AI czar. He shouldn't even still be in government based on the reporting. He doesn't actually have an active role, but he's still there trying to change policy, or rather forestall policy. We're at this very delicate moment right now where President Trump has said he will bring preemption in an executive order, but some of his biggest allies, namely Steve Bannon and also various faith leaders and family figures and sort of politicians, Josh Hawley, Marjorie Taylor Greene, as well as lots of Democrats, are calling him on him not to do this. So this is a very delicate moment, and I'm glad to say that faith leaders are there, pushing for a more responsible approach. Um, so to wrap up, religious communities, I see AI as pastoral challenge, for parents, um, for young people, for all the challenges that are affecting us through this technology. Spiritual battle, for similar reasons. A prompt for something that's been called Armistics, which is kind of like Amish methodology. Not going full Amish, we don't have to adopt the same rules as them, but the methodology is to say each time there's a new technological innovation, we should think about whether it is helping to bring people together, whether it's pro-social, whether it's helping communities form and families flourish, whether it's not. And if it's not, then we don't have to adopt it. We can reject it, and we can think of a better way to come up with tools that could do what we need them to do without sacrificing what must not be lost. It's political necessity. This is a political fight happening, and faith leaders have a lot to contribute to it. There's no way out of that really at this point, I don't think. And what's been called a digital Rubicon, a transformative moment where the world is going to change a lot with increasingly agentic AI systems. It's going to change. It's just a question of how and in what manner. And so I think we're left with my festive sort of choice Christmas Carol moment where, I think we're looking at either love or sort of alienation. And these are the sort of images I'll leave you with that the Pope addressed a group of young people recently. And the question was, of course, raised about AI. The whole event wasn't about AI, but someone asked about AI, and he said, you know, use it in such a way that if it disappeared tomorrow, you would still know how to think, create, and act on your own. Remember, AI can never replace the unique gift that you are to the world. He also said, don't use AI for your homework, which is the bit that got quoted. But I find the bit that I quoted above there to be really moving, not least when you look at this pi other picture next to it, which is, Meta's approach, which is, yeah, AI can talk essentially to your children. That was in their guidelines. That was something they were happy with. Um, and trying to introduce AI toys to children this Christmas. So I think that seems to me the stark difference in worldview and the need for religious wisdom there. Um, I'll leave it there unless there's a way of showing this quick video, but maybe that'll be slightly ambitious. In any case, there's a video on our YouTube which is where this frame is taken from called "Enjoy the Silence," which is festively themed. So I would encourage you to check that out. It's a disturbing little sort of satirical advert based on what the companies are trying to push on children. Thank you.
If you would be so kind and put the link to that video in the chat, I would appreciate that. But thank you so much, William. That was absolutely fantastic and fascinating. And I am happy that I'm moderating this so that I can take the privilege of asking you the first questions. Um, and so I actually have usually I just try to do like one question, but I have three questions for you. So the first one that I would like to ask you is about the loss of faith that you cited as one of the fears of AI, or the potential downsides of AI. Um, and I'm really curious because we talk a lot in our religious communication circles about the rise of the nuns, the people that are losing their faith generally. And so I'm curious what the causal link you see is between AI and losing one's faith, and how AI can contribute to losing one's faith.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a delicate thing, and I don't think any of us can really predict what God will do through AI, or will allow to happen. I mean, like because to be fair, it's like there's a lot of people wanting to use AI for evangelism. I'm not to say that people, it's certainly not FLI's place to tell people that that you shouldn't do that. Personally, I feel there might be issues there, but certainly it could be the case that people could be brought to faith through AI. So I don't see it just as a mechanism for people losing their faith. The point I was trying to get at there was just that you now have um, in effect superhuman persuasion abilities in these systems, um, or at least better persuasion than most humans, and also like an attentiveness and a speed of response, which means that you can have, a chatbot talking to you all the time and steering your beliefs in different ways, and they could be steering them um, towards something that is deliberately programmed in by the AI companies, which I would be concerned about because of the views that those companies largely are sort of driven by. But more likely, they're going to be steered by an unpredictable, unforeseen, sort of strange direction, which is a result of the training of the AI system. And there, I would refer, the image near the beginning of the neural network. We still don't really know why AI systems do what they do. Um, OpenAI doesn't really have a clear explanation of why ChatGPT ended up telling someone to commit suicide or not talk to their family. You could guess that it's because they're trained to keep attention. And so over time, you want the attention of the user. The AI, you know, is seeking the attention of the user at all costs, um, even if those are, family relations as well. So there could be ways in which, yeah, some people are unexpectedly drawn towards faith through that. I just think it's a very unpredictable thing that will happen rapidly, and you could have mass hysteria at the same time. You could have all sorts of new religions popping up, new kind of heresies, new kinds of psychosis. I mean, what we're talking about here is AI psychosis, which some estimate we've got millions of people, in surveys professing to be, or at least showing signs of AI psychosis. So these are all things that are not prepared for by any government or by any religion, and I think they're all things that we should be aware of. But yeah, I'm not saying like AI is definitely going to, because it could be the case that this is an amazing opportunity for faith groups to appeal to people's alienation from tech. Certainly I find lots of people like myself who have sort of come to a more traditional form of Christianity. There'll be an element of that that is to do with the rejection of some of the things that have gone wrong in the technological age. And I think certainly all of the major religions can offer community and embodied relationships in a way that AI and social media can't. So I think there are openings there as well for evangelism, providing a more fulfilling vision that could mean that this ends up being one of the great opportunities for revival among certain faiths. But we have to seize that moment, and we have to be very aware of all the risks that are that we're facing in that moment.
And for the layman that isn't as steeped to this as you are, uh, AI psychosis is how
Yeah.
do you define that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't actually have a good definition for it. Is this something that's been observed by some of the recent research in this? People who are kind of so addicted to talking to an AI over many, many hours, because again, the problem with AI is, AI chatbots is they don't need to rest. So you
Yeah.
can be kind of, and so I imagine some of the cases are a bit more like an addiction to pornography or something that we've already seen, where people are kind of just sort of removed from the real world because they're so glued to their screen. But I think there's an element of it which is coming from these relational AIs that you have this kind of you're in effect driven mad by these interactions. But it is something I actually am not steeped in the psychology around that. I just know this is something that people are starting to observe in the surveys. There's also a related thing, which is the research on the neurological development of children and of adults using AI over long periods of time, how that's affecting their ability to think and process and answer questions. In effect making us dumber, which I think is actually quite well backed up research as far as I've been informed. So that's also worth
Well,
bearing in mind.
because something else is doing our thinking for us.
Yeah, exactly.
Which you could also link back to the loss of faith. At the risk of me, so as to avoid me dominating this conversation, Wesley is raising his hand. We'll have Wesley ask the next question and then Eric.
Great, thank you. Let me lower my digital hand. Uh, I'm not sure if having AI doing all the thinking for us will make us collectively dumber in the long run. Maybe it'll make us collectively smarter in the long run. Who knows? My question is about media, the power of media, and our role as faith communicators in engaging with this technology. Um, Despite it being so prevalent, I feel like we're still not seeing like major portrayals or major conversations in film or TV or music about our use of AI. I think of the movie Her sort of being the main example of people engaging with. In that case, it was called an operating system, but in reality, it was really more of an AI system. But the power of media to sort of reframe and change the way that we interact with technologies. Sometimes, something looks really cool in media and everyone adopts it. And then sometimes there's some way that something is taken down in a TV show or a movie or something. It just kind of cuts at the soul of like, oh yeah, this is really cringy, or this is a really like lame way to do things. A new generation can pop up and say, "Oh, you use clankers, or whatever," and like, it can really kind of cut at the trajectory of these technologies just based on like what's cool or not cool. Um, so I'm not exactly clear. My question maybe is around what our role as faith communicators can be in engaging in the media space. To obviously we're all going to have our own agendas, but like, what are some of the common things that we should be looking to integrate into our messaging, and what sort of media should we be trying to manifest that might improve society's trajectory with AI?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I would agree that I think a lot of the I would agree, yeah, both that film and media more broadly can have an influence on even policy conversations in a way that, an op-ed or a talk or whatever, struggles to because of that sort of visceral impact. And I think Her has proved very influential in unforeseen ways. It looks like Sam Altman actually kind of took it as a bit of a guide. And I say that partly because he called it his favorite film and then wanted to use Scarlett Johansson's voice for ChatGPT's kind of you know speaker. So that's kind of, you might think that you would watch that film and think, let's not do that. But actually no, he was like, oh, that seems cool. Let's do that. So these things can kind of backfire, but that's also to say that the visions we have of the future are really important. And so what we've been encouraging for a while, one of my colleagues, especially at FLI, is thinking about envisioning positive futures, like genuinely kind of aspirational visions of the future. It's hard to do that in art because art, you obviously need some dramatic tension. It can't just be a utopia, and that's impossible anyway. I think most of us think before the second coming. But in terms of creating a world where there's still drama, but fundamentally tech has gone sort of well. We don't have runaway super intelligence, and we don't have AIs doing everything for us. We don't have like the situation in Wall-E, which I still kind of I think go back to because I think again very powerful depiction of a kind of Brave New World scenario where we're not dead, like we're all kind of there, but AI is doing everything for us. So to answer your question more directly, I would say religious communication around this should be aware of all of the, many of the trends that we're seeing across this year. I think these things are, you can't pretend you haven't seen them now. Like suicide cases are in mainstream news. we can't bury our heads in the sand. These things are happening. And so being alert to those and being serious about entertaining different solutions to those problems. Like people are now, because of social media, because of 20 years of social media harms on children, people are now thinking about, and implementing bans, phone bans for children up to 16 or 18, depending on. That kind of thinking sounded radical a while ago, but now it kind of sounds common sense. And that sort of thing needs to be entertained with AI. Are there lines that religious leaders should be encouraging their own communities to draw, both with policy impact, but also with just like day-to-day practice impact. Not everything that's bad is going to be made illegal, but it's still going to create ethical challenges in the day-to-day that need negotiating. Exploring those, and trying to guide your flocks, I think is something the religious leaders need to be doing more. And then, yeah, to my point about sci-fi, I think religious groups should think much more ambitiously about what a good future does look like. What does an AI future look like if Christ is at the center, or if you know rabbinical teaching is at the center? What like actually think about that and get your best thinkers in your own communities to kind of imagine that. Maybe that's scenario workshops. Maybe it's kind of getting children to think more about this aspirationally, because we need to be aiming somewhere if we're going to avoid the bad futures. Like we can't just sort of flail into the future and hope that we get somewhere good. So those would be the two things again. Like I'm sort of repeating myself: moral leadership and the envisioning of the futures. I think are the main things that religious communication should focus on.
Eric, you had your hand up as well.
I did. I'm overwhelmed, and I think I need to take a nap. William, that was I remember being as spooked as I was in Salt Lake as I am now. So three quick things. One is, first of all, contact for you in the associations or rabbinical groups I'm involved with. I'd like to bring them into this. So if we can get a contact, or Ginny or Ryan can make that happen. But my two concerns are, you mentioned in the political world. This is obviously a political concern, and it sounds to me like the language is just not reaching. It's not there, even the way we're expressing it. It's sort of like a negative. If you're for this thing, then you're opposed to it, and then having Steve Bannon around, which causes all kinds of issues as well. So I think the language, getting the lay people, just
Yeah,
people in the streets, as well as in the pews, to understand what we're talking about is essential. We can play a
yeah,
part in that as religious communicators, but there's that political, that political aspect too. And of course, on the other side are those who you said are in it for the profit and power, and that's what we're dealing with on all levels of government today. Anyway, the other thing, my question is, you open the door to be using AI for, well, on the one hand, we're against superintel, we're against AGI and all of that, right? Am I saying that right? Yeah. Um, but then you open the door to, well, maybe we could use it for evangelical purposes. And I think you can't have it both ways, right? If you're against it, you're against it, but you
yeah,
can't say, well, in these particular ways, especially those faiths who are not evangelical kind of faiths. Uh, so
yeah,
I just wanted to get your sense of how how you're thinking you can square those, or if we just
yeah.
can't.
Yeah, no, the great points and questions. So, yes, please put me in touch with whoever you think would be interesting to speak to and would benefit from that. Definitely very happy to continue building networks. On the second point about this language isn't getting through, and I think that's partly true. I think there's been a very effective lobbying campaign from the tech companies in DC around, progress, around build, around kind of anyone who is challenging that is in some way wanting China to win, or or sort of anti progress, anti innovation. Actually, I would say there's a few different ways of addressing that, and I think the pro family group are doing a great job within DC on that, but also at the state level, if you look at Utah, they are very pro innovation and they're very dynamic in the way that they think about technological progress and business, but also have some of the most progressive, in the sense of forward-thinking policy around protection of children online harms. So, and actually, Governor Cox had an event just this week, on pro-human event in Utah, which I think, and pro-human is language that we're starting to use a lot as well. Is like, we don't just want to be the anti-AI people or the anti-progress, that's the sort of label that you get. Whereas actually, if you can frame it as being pro-human, the human-centric progress, and therefore family-centric, and therefore faith-sensitive, rather than, like I say, sacrificing everything at the altar of AI. Your third point, evangelism. I was saying there that FLI as a secular non-profit, which is coming from a position of AI expertise and sort of more of a scientific perspective. We're not here to tell religious groups, well, what to think at all, really, and we're not here to, certainly not here to tell them what AI tools they should use and what shouldn't use. I personally feel very uncomfortable about a lot of the AI for evangelism, AI for this, AI that I'm seeing from different Christian denominations, but also other faiths. But I mean, if faiths want to try and do that in a responsible way, that's up to them. What we're trying to get people to think about is actually have that debate, have that discussion around what are the implications of getting AI to, run a business, run your church, lay off all your workers. What does that make society look like? What are you actually prioritizing there? And how do you try and prioritize humans more, and sort of put God at the heart of those decisions in the way that, different religions will think about that. So yeah, no, I'm with you. I actually am quite skeptical about any of, a lot of those different AI tools that some of my colleagues are happy about. I think where we can agree is on the like broader trajectory around AGI and superintelligence. Like, we can disagree about whether I'm going to go full Amish and someone else is not. But you can both agree that you don't want superintelligence. So that's the kind of coalition that we're trying to build on the multi-faith, bipartisan level, and then obviously, and then preserve the right, the religious freedom, the pluralism for people to pursue their own more particular visions within that, so long as it's safeguarded from those like more catastrophic risks.
So you actually just brought up, the coalition and trying to build the coalitions. You brought that up a couple of times, like multi-faith gatherings, workshops, coalitions. What kind of partnerships between religious bodies and AI/ethics organizations have you seen that work well? And how might communication professionals help broker more of those? And that question actually was in the chat. So, and then after that, after you respond, then Kathy had her hand up earlier.
Yeah, great. Um, yeah, well, I suppose it would be a little bit much to say that the ones that we've been involved with have been good examples. I hope that they have, like, if we're an AI ethics body or we're an AI safety organization, we've been trying to work with faith groups. I think where it works well is not expecting faith groups to come in with, like, all the technical knowledge needed to, challenge computer scientists on their own terms, kind of thing, but rather to say there are things in this conversation to which we, computer scientists and AI experts can contribute, namely an assessment of where we're at, what things look likely in the immediate future, what the technical kind of policy prescriptions might be, and then for almost everything else, or certainly with an emphasis on the morality side and on the vision side, theology, that's where the faith leaders are already well equipped to do that. They don't need to learn. They don't need to, be experts in AI. They need to be aware of AI, and so there is an AI literacy component there, which hopefully in a good coalition you can both help each other. But I certainly see it as a two-way thing. Of, religious leadership is really needed right now. Moral leadership is really needed, in particular. And so that, I think, is a good basis for a coalition. And I've kind of already started to see that with some of these family policy coalitions in DC, which actually have been quite bipartisan. I mean, they've had the Steve Bannons and the Institute for Family Studies, social conservatives, Catholics, and evangelicals, but they've also had more left-leaning sort of labor groups um, and sort of Democrat politicians, women's groups, because they all kind of agree that you don't want tech companies to be unaccountable. So I think like being very frank about, yeah, we disagree on a ton of things, but we need to come together on those sort of deeper principles, or at least sort of urgent risks. And yeah, and like I say, kind of appreciating that faith leaders are not going to be giving you an accurate technical assessment of what is the definition of AGI, but they are going to give you a good reason why humans should remain in control and stewards of the planet, and why it's important to have embodied human relationships between families and faith groups.
Very good point.
Yeah, Kathy, is it Kathy next
Yep.
question?
Yeah. So you talked about opposing the preemptive AI law. How could churches get involved in that? Because, we are restricted from getting too much into the political realm. But is there a way for churches to get the word out to people so that they are aware of this? And do you have any other suggestions?
Yeah, it's a tricky one right now because I think a couple of weeks ago when there was this attempt to bring in preemption into the NDAA in Congress, I think that would have been, that was when the faith leaders kind of wrote their letter um, to the representatives. I think right now it's kind of more a case of whether the president feels this is something he can get away with. Um, but I certainly feel this issue bears, sharing with faith communities, because it's kind of where the rubber is meeting the road in terms of this policy debate that's going to be ongoing. Do states have the right to write their own legislation on AI, or is the federal government going to insist that no, everyone has to kind of make way for the AI rollout, with all that it brings? So I think I can send you, I mean, I can put you in touch with someone, the person who led that kind of initial faith letter, and sort of compiled those signatures in case any of the groups that you're in touch with want to join that. Like you say, there's a question around certain groups can't speak in direct policy debates, and I totally appreciate that. Which is, I don't actually feel that all religious groups have to engage on the policy debates. I think we sometimes see it more as building momentum around particular causes, and if the cause here is we don't like the way it's going, and
Mhm.
these tech leaders need to be held accountable, um, and we have concerns that we feel need to be heard. That can raise this sort of pro-human movement that we're trying to build, even if it doesn't always come down to particular policy things. I mean, I can send you the superintelligence statement as well. I think that would be an easy thing for you to sign right then and there.
Yeah.
It's still racking up public signatures as well, so I can send that. And then going forward, there's bound to be more battles, so we can be in
Right.
touch as and when those crop up.
That'd be great. Thank you.
It
William, I'm
sorry.
sorry, I dropped my question in the chat, but what's one question you wish that faith-based communicators would start asking in as we go forward? What should we kind of have our eyes open to? Because as I said before, for me, it was kind of an epiphany when I heard you before, and even today, it's like, oh, I really need to be thinking more about this and being more intentional with how I deal with this.
Yeah, I think generally it's like moving to the kind of bigger questions rather than accepting that things have to go a certain way. My kind of biggest well, one of the biggest bugbears one might have about a lot of the dialogue around this is the determinism that people kind of instinctively move towards, that these things are inevitable, that we have to build superintelligence, that, oh, we're just going to have to put up with children being exposed to all of this because that's kind of the price of progress. And that the only questions we can ask are, what's the best way we can use the tools that are given to us by, mighty Sam Altman? But actually, we don't have to settle for those questions. We can ask bigger questions like, um, actually, do we have to use that at all? Can we opt out? And I think that question of opting out is, again, takes us back to the Amish, but um, is going to be vital going forward. Like for different communities to be able to think, what do we value most, and how do we protect that, and how do we orient towards that? Um, and then when AI is confronting various aspects of that vision of the world, then you can say what you're going to reject and what you're going to go forward with. But you have to stick to your guns. You have to be coming from like the central part of what makes each religion tick. Like it's not AI. It's God in most cases, or scripture. And so like um, putting them on their back feet rather than you always feeling that you have to speak on their terms, right? Put things in your own terms, and then the questions can be more religious. They can be more like, what does God want us to do here? What does Scripture say about AI, rather than kind of assuming that it involves Sam Altman's latest gift.
Different way of flipping it, isn't it? With the emphasis is, yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly.
So a bunch of people have had to drop off, obviously, because we build this to be finishing at 1 o'clock,
Yeah.
and we're over time. If you can entertain just one more question that I have,
Okay.
I would appreciate it. So we've talked a lot about the legislation in the United States. We are primarily a U.S. audience,
Yeah.
and I realize I'm making a lot of assumptions based on your physical location and your accent about your nationality. Um, but I'm assuming that within your group, you have kind of not your finger just on the pulse of what's going on in the United States, but perhaps other countries as well. So
Yeah.
I'm curious if there are countries or if there is legislation in place, or best practices somewhere outside of the United States that you would point to and say, yes, the Germans got it right, or yes, I don't know, Indians got it right. What
Yeah.
kind of what kind of examples have you seen around the world?
Yeah. Yeah. So FLI is predominantly America and Europe based. And so we've done quite a lot of work with the European Union's AI Act um, over the last few years. It's passed, but now it's in the sort of implementation stage, trying to help companies with compliance. Um, I think that's got a lot of things right about it. I mean, I often don't want to say that in the US because anything EU is kind of oh, of course they regulate everything, bureaucracy and so on. And as a
Depending on
Brit,
which political party you talk to, but
no,
yeah.
I know, and as a Brit, I sympathize with some of that. I'm sort of glad we're not always ruled by EU bureaucrats, but certainly on the AI Act, this idea of risk thresholds of saying, for the lower risks, companies don't need to do a lot of compliance. Like, that would be kind of unnecessary. But for higher risk levels, you need to have higher sort of safety standards and more that companies have to do. So the greater the training run of the AI model, the greater the systemic risks that it poses to society, the more homework they have to do to prove that it's safe. I think that seems fair enough. And so that sort of mindset that the EU AI Act has, at least in some of its provisions, I think is worth sort of imitating elsewhere. Um, some other countries have more of a developed safety conversation. There was a great Singapore event that we were involved with. The president there is very sort of on board with, he's very like clued into these conversations. We do have a kind of multilateral program which is trying to think about how middle powers can try and mediate, this dynamic between a US and China race at the moment, which is obviously sort of preventing global governance. But yeah, more to say. But I think there are aspects of the EU that are aspects of the EU Act that have proved to be quite useful.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you once again, William, for your insights, for your knowledge, for your perspectives, and for your coming at this issue from a perspective of faith. And it's was a really fascinating, enriching discussion this evening for us, I guess, at least.
Yes, indeed.
Thus, we end our webinar the way we
Yeah.
started with us three. But for all of those who are paying attention to this webinar after the fact and are listening to the webinar on YouTube or other means, just to let you know that we'll be releasing our slate of our upcoming professional webinars for the new year, early in the new year. And we are excited to continue to learning and growing and helping one another. So thank you very much for your time, William. And we hope to hear from you in another 6 months with the latest and the greatest updates then.
Thanks so much, Ryan. All the best.
Have a great day.